Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names.
The research is actually a lot more interesting than what is being portrayed in this video. There are several studies here. There was one famous study that was done that suggested that first name differentiation was indeed being used by employers. So if your name was Lakeisha, for example, this is the name that is actually used in the study, Lakeisha versus Greg, that you are less likely to get a callback. There was another study that showed a historically black last name like Washington or Jefferson provided no actual differentiation from historically white names, like Greenberg, for example. So if your name was Steve Greenberg versus Steve Jefferson, you're just as likely to get a callback as Steve Jefferson. What that suggests, and this was confirmed by subsequent studies, is that the actual issue here is a question of class discrimination, not an issue of race discrimination. In other words, the reason that people are discriminating against Lakeisha as opposed to against Steve Johnson or Steve Washington is because people are actually using the first name as a stand-in for social class. They are figuring that if you were named Lakeisha, it's because you probably came from a more impoverished background. Now, this is not restricted to the black community. This happens in the Jewish community as well. If you get an applicant and the applicant's name is Ben, you might treat that applicant different than if that person's name is Ben Yamin.
You might, so let's see the data on it. I'm not going to argue there's no anti-Semitism in America, but if that's real, then prove it. Show data on it. Also, would it be, I don't think it would read Benjamin on the paper. I think it would just look like Benjamin. But again, like what he's saying right now is literally like, so there's bias in other places, so the bias against black people can't exist. Dude, if there's data on anti-Semitism and hiring practices, which is totally possible, then sure. I mean, Jews are an oppressed class of people. So yeah, makes sense. Ben Shapiro followed that up by saying, so it's a class thing, not a race thing. So here's a follow-up question. How do you tell a person's class by their name, Tyrone? Let's really think for a minute. Try to imagine a connection there that doesn't involve racism or racial bias. You read the name Shaniqua, and you think low class. How do you get from A to B without racial bias? The answer is you literally can't. The association is between ghetto names and poor black people. That's the association. But that is a heavily racialized association. That is a bias which is irrevocably associated with race. So what Ben Shapiro is doing here when he says it's actually a class thing is he is proving he is racist. And that's not, I'm not being flippant there. He is proving his racial bias. Because if he can effortlessly associate names like Shaniqua and low class, and then reduce that exclusively to a class thing, he is very clearly indicating that's an association he holds true as well. I bet you Ben Shapiro, as owner of the Daily Wire, has turned down many a Shaniqua looking to get in on his particular political outfit.